NGVR, PlayStation VR for PS5, specs leak blowout, all the details. This story was broken by PSVR on Parole, credit to the team there. On the 3rd of August, Sony held a private summit for prospective developers of its next generation of PlayStation VR, codenamed NGVR. It was 1.5 hours long and a lot of new information has been revealed about the specifications of the platform, which Sony didn't reveal previously. And it's a shame that some people have leaked and spoiled Sony's surprises because ultimately it will benefit Sony's competitor, which is Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook. But also it's really good to know these specs. So firstly, the name. This will come as no surprise, but Sony wasn't referring to it as PSVR 2. Instead, it was using the term NGVR, Next Generation Virtual Reality. When it comes to the screen, it will be using a Fresnel OLED screen. Outside of VR, Fresnel lenses can help concentrate a light source and it can make the glass lighter. So perhaps it's being used here to make the projected images sharper for the user. Resolution wise, it will have 2000 by 2040 resolution per eye. PSVR has 960 by 1080 per eye. So the resolution is roughly doubled. This means images should be sharper and hopefully reading in-game text will be a little bit easier as well. The screen will be using HDR, so this means when looking at images you will see that vibrant separation of colours, the blacks will look deeper, the whites will look brighter, so overall increasing that intensity, that differentiation of colours. There is going to be a boost to the field of view. Now, field of view is the amount of your vision which is filled with a VR image. The more the better, because if you don't see the edges of your headset and just the game world, it will give you a better experience because you're going to feel that like you're more immersed in the world. So for context, PSVR has 100 degrees FOV and the NGVR will have 110 degrees, an increase of 10 degrees. So it's not massive, but it definitely will be improved. The Valve Index, it has a FOV of 130 degrees, so obviously the NGVR will not be as much as this, but Sony must be sure it can maintain that visual illusion, and it's definitely going to be an improvement on the PSVR 1. Now, something that's so important with VR is resource efficiency through the use of the visuals. And what I mean by this is, with VR, the hardware is having to draw an image twice for each eye. So inevitably, this is going to cause a hit on visual performance. So for example, the PS4 having to draw the image of a flat game, a traditional game, it's using all its power to do that. But when it's having to draw that image twice for each eye with PSVR, that power is inevitably going to be diluted, and this means each image is not going to be as detailed. So the way to tackle this is not wasting computer resources. NGVR will be using foveated rendering, and this is when the headset can detect where the player is looking with eye tracking and then draw those images where the eye is looking in more detail, and then reducing the detail around where the player is not looking. Also, there will be another technology that will work in tandem with this, and it's called flexible scaling resolution, and the exact details haven't been released yet, but it's probably using a very similar technology to go hand in hand with foveated rendering. A big barrier to entry for the masses to virtual reality is the fact that you can experience motion sickness. And some really fantastic news is that Sony has got a solution it believes can work with this. And this is by using haptics on the headset to cause some sort of vibration on the player's head to help reduce motion sickness. And we did get a preview of this via a leaked patent. Additionally, this vibration is also going to be used for immersion in some way. My guess is that it's going to be a very low level of vibration, because you don't want to be playing a VR boxing game and come out of it with bruises and maybe a concussion, although it would definitely increase that sense of presence. But it is interesting to see how Sony is approaching this, to see that Sony is looking at making you feel more immersed in the game, not just through haptics and vibrations via the controllers, but actually on the headset itself. Sony announced the new VR controllers back in March, and it also revealed that they will have DualSense style haptics and adaptive triggers. But coming from this conference, a new technology has been revealed, and that is capacitive touch sensors. These will work by tracking the distance between your fingers and your thumb, and it is analog based, so hopefully it means it can detect more subtle movements. And the whole idea of this is, for example, if you are moving your main fingers, so a game can better react to how you are controlling, how you are holding the controller. Something to know is that it only works on the thumb, the index finger and the middle finger. And my guess is that there doesn't need to be a sensor for the other two fingers, because judging from the position of the first three fingers in context to how they are moving, the controller and the games will be able to detect what the others are doing anyway. So this shouldn't be an issue at all for anything, unless perhaps you're playing a Star Trek game that requires you to do a Star Trek Vulcan greeting. Who knows? Together with the haptics and the adaptive triggers, the touch sensors should add another layer to control of a game. Now, as discussed in my PlayStation Into the Metaverse video, all first-party 3D games should also include a VR mode. This will mean that there is immediately many more titles that can be used for VR. So any owners of the platform, they're not having to wait around for specific games made just for VR. Pretty much any 3D game will be able to support it. It also means that you don't have to buy a game twice for the standard flat mode and VR mode. And what No Man's Sky does so well is that it allows you to play in both modes, and you can easily switch from one mode to the other, allowing you to use the same game save. And this is really beneficial because no matter how good VR is, you don't always want to play in VR mode. Sometimes you just want to sit back without a headset on. So because Sony is pushing this, it seems it finally recognizes the importance of regular games for people to be able to play, and it's important for VR players to have a vast library of games to be able to use. Now, Sony also said that it wants to move away from VR experiences, and I'm all for getting rid of shovelware that demonstrates what VR can do, but has no real merit in itself. It's like a nice experience, you can play them for about an hour or two, but then after that you never use them again. So I understand the need to move away from that sort of stuff, but for more important VR apps, like Google Earth or museum apps, I think they are a very relevant part of VR in general, and I hope that PlayStation makes sure they are supported on NGVR, because they can help the ecosystem grow beyond just being a gaming platform. Nothing was said about backwards compatibility with PSVR 1 games, and considering Sony's understanding of the importance of supporting PS4 games on PS5, this strikes me as pretty much a given, unless there is a technical barrier. And it may be because PSVR 1 uses a camera to track the headset that this is going to be incompatible with the new headset. So we just have to wait a bit longer to find out about this. But what Sony was stressing is that developers remaster their PSVR 1 games. So this perhaps gives us a clue that maybe there won't be backwards compatibility. And if they do have to remaster their games, it shouldn't be too difficult to change their games from the old system to the new system, hopefully. And whilst the headset itself wasn't shown and a release date wasn't mentioned, Sony said launch plans will be revealed in early 2022. And traditionally, Sony does like to release its hardware in November. Certainly it releases its consoles in November. So that is the Christmas season, the holiday season, and that seems the most likely time, unless it's going to pull out a surprise move and release it earlier, which I would have no problem with. That's it, that's some pretty great news, finally some movement, and Sony has already told us that it will be likely to be giving us some PSVR news later this year. So for more informative content and discussion that's interesting to you, leave a like and subscribe. Cheers!